Now let's talk about Nord Stream 2. Let's talk about commodities. Let's talk about prices. Let's talk about energy policy. Because I think Liam Halligan, GBNews' economics editor, all of that has been brought into very much sharper focus today. Just explain to people what Nord Stream 2 actually is.
Well, it's well known now, because we're in the middle of this conflict, that Russia provides Western Europe with about 40% of the natural gas that we use. And that's been the case pretty much since Soviet days, and even during the Soviet Union, when the Cold War was, absolutely front and centre of global events, that gas supply continued from the Soviet Union. What's happening now is that gas supply, rather than going through Ukraine, it's increasingly going from the north of Russia, near St. Petersburg, across the floor of the Baltic Sea, just underneath Sweden and Denmark, straight into Germany. So it's marginalising Ukraine. And the fear among lots of Western analysts is that if Russia doesn't need Ukraine to have pipelines going across it, then there'll be less concern about political turmoil in Ukraine, so there might be some expansionism. Now, there are two Nord Stream pipelines. Just bear with me. Nord Stream 1 was completed in 2011 between Russia and Germany. It didn't open until 2015 because, again, there was a lot of political aggro. That it was, pretty much nerds and commodity traders who understood it, because there wasn't then a huge conflict. There'd been a conflict in 2008-9 with Georgia, but at that point, east-west tensions weren't huge. So Nord Stream 1 went through on the nod, but even that took 4 years from completion to it beginning. Nord Stream 2 is along the same route across the floor of the Baltic Sea. Again, the longest undersea gas pipeline in the world. It is complete. And what's now happened is that Germany, which helped it to be completed. It's partly owned by Gazprom, the Russian state giant, and Germany and some of the other surrounding countries. Germany supported Nord Stream 2 for years, but at the very last moment, as it's about to be given the sign-off, it's been tested and pressurised.
And the Americans approved it. Yeah. Biden's approved it.
The Americans have approved it, but now it's being used as a bargaining chip. It's not going to be allowed to be used. The Germans have said no for now, but it absolutely is for now. You're not going to have that massive multi-billion-pound pipeline providing Russian gas to Europe, gas it desperately needs. It's not going to sit there and do nothing when there's a pipeline next to it that is working. So Nord Stream 2 will happen, but there's a lot of symbolism involved here. It's not being used for now in order for the West to try and exert some leverage. The Germans, quite reluctantly, it must be said, given this conflagration between Russia and Ukraine.
And Liam, it's not just gas that we get from Russia.
Oh, no.
There's oil that we get from Russia. There's nickel that we get from Russia. There's a whole host of commodities that come from Russia. What are the implications for pricing and commodity supply if these tensions escalate further?
Well, Russia is an energy superpower. There's no getting away from it. It's also a food superpower. Russia's the world's biggest exporter of wheat. The Russians and the Ukrainians between them provide a third of the world's wheat, almost 20% of the world's corn, 80% of the world's sunflower oil. These are really important commodities that go into many products. So as things stand now, I must say, I've watched this very closely today, as I know you have. We've had many discussions about it. The sanctions that the UK's put on so far are pretty lukewarm, pretty tepid. There are individuals who don't even...
These are 3 billionaires.
3 people that don't even live in the UK. There are 31 Russian companies listed on the London Stock Exchange. Nothing seems to be happening to them. So that's why the financial markets, the FTSE 100, it's ended up today, because the sanctions could have been a lot worse. If this is the best the UK has got, then it's not very much, frankly, according to the financiers. But that doesn't mean that there won't be lower level sanctions and tit for tat things which will impact this cost of living crisis being felt by many GB News viewers. For instance, Nigel, little noticed, the Russians have slapped an export ban on something called potassium nitrate. Now, you're a former commodity trader. You know what potassium nitrate is. It's the basic raw material for fertiliser. That's why farming friends of mine are phoning me saying, crikey, fertiliser prices are going through the roof. It's not a joke, because when fertiliser prices go up, food becomes more expensive. We've already got a cost of living crisis in this country. We're already facing a triple whammy, higher energy bills, higher tax, higher inflation in April. if this Russia-Ukraine crisis escalates, if sanctions get tighter than they currently are, we could see even higher energy prices, petrol and diesel, and food prices
So
too.
a lot will depend
That's
on
the reality.
A lot will depend on what Biden says in the next...
Indeed.
When he finally...
Well, I'm sure GBNews would much prefer to hear from you particularly and maybe me as well than Joe Biden.
No.
But it's a serious point. We can beat our chest about sanctions and, in many ways, sanctions are justified. There's some serious stuff going on in Donetsk and Luhansk, as you, me and GBNews colleagues have been saying all day. But as they come to actually ink in those sanctions, Western leaders will be mindful of the impact of those Russian sanctions on the cost of living crisis, on living standards in the West,
it's very real,
on people who vote, on people whose support they need.
Liam, thank you very much indeed.